And I hope that the Romanian people will be able to fix this and overrule this odious ruling that's come from their so-called constitutional court and put in the president that they want.
Bă, voi credeți că lumea are o impresie bună despre noi? Vă mirați de ce am fost lăsați chiar ca pe ultimul proști la urmă când a fost vorba de Schengen? Apropo de Schengen, motiv de bucurie? Bineînțeles că da. Bă, da, m-aș fi bucurat să nu obținem din poziția în genunchi și cu gura plină, cum spun eu tot timpul. Ca ajutor, cuvântul damă de companie vă spune ceva? Am intrat în Schengen, da. Bă, dar cu ce preț? Chiar nu mai contează prețul? Asta e așa. Chiar și așa, cum am obținut noi, voi ce nu știți, este că din decembrie 8 țări din Schengen vor închide granițele și vor băga controle. Adică cu ce ne mai ajută viza Schengen? Bă, ce să mai zic? Ăștia din fruntea țării, de care nu mai scăpăm, de zici că e cea mai dracurie, sunt pe poziția, nu contează cu cine votați, că tot noi punem pe cine vrem. Cu alte cuvinte, data viitoare stați acasă, nu vă mai duceți la vot, că vă anunțăm noi cine a ieșit. Bă, dar știți ce mă atac? Că de data asta numărul proștilor a fost în trecut. Și mă refer la acel grup de care vă tot spun. Proștii există, au existat și vor exista. Și au fost dintotdeauna foarte periculoși, că sunt mulți. Hai să vă faceți o idee cam ce zic străinii. Și atenție, dacă vă plictisiți în 10 secunde, intrați pe TikTok, mai bine nu stați aici.
Good morning, everybody. Romania has been the victim of a globalist cabal coup, as you probably heard earlier in the weekend. Carlin Georgescu was standing to be the president of Romania. I'm supporting him along with a lot of other people who are freedom fighters, social conservatives, traditionalists, and people who want peace and who want an end to the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia.
So the first of those, which really, to us, it was a kind of political earthquake, an anti-democratic outrage, was the announcement that the Romania's Constitutional Court announced the complete annulment of the presidential process, which comes following the shock success of total outsider, Russian sympathizer, strange health food fanatic Calin Georgescu, who has, you can disagree or agree with Calin Georgescu's policies, but the announcement that they've decided to completely cancel an entire election simply because he's such an outsider, said to throw NATO into question, etc., etc. Is this as anti-democratic an outrage as it seems?
Well, it's totally anti-democratic, and it sets a very important precedent because there's a wider trend throughout Europe towards the elites, the judiciary and the political elites, essentially trying to delegitimate elections where the populist parties and individuals have succeeded. So these days, every time a populist movement forges forward, you inevitably have this claim that the Russians have intervened, that somehow the social media has been manipulated and the elections are not fair. But this is the first time that they're going to step beyond that. And not only did they claim that the election was somehow influenced by the wrong kind of people, but they've actually annulled the result of a democratically held election. I think we need to be also very clear what has happened, because the claim that he's a complete outsider, Georgescu, is not true. Georgescu has been involved in politics in Romania for a very, very long time. Indeed, some of the centrist parties and other parties have actually suggested that he either become minister, has even been talked about as a future potential prime minister. So he's not a complete outsider.
He's also a Christian, a father, a patriot. He loves his country. And a lot of people who are Romanians in the diaspora of Romania, such as the hundreds of thousands of Romanians live in the UK, said that if he was elected, they would go back to Romania because he would lift Romania up to being a proud country that supports itself, that has traditional values and stands against the degeneracy and the warmongering of the New World Order. So he's a good guy. So Carlin Georgescu was in the top two. I think he was second in the first round, unexpectedly, to all of the old legacy parties who are pushing all the agendas, the war agenda, the trans agenda, the climate agenda, all of this same nonsense that you know are what's being imposed all around the world unless the people stand up against it. But he came in the top two. What happened, which to me is a great shock, I don't think this could happen in the UK because we don't have the same mechanism here. But apparently in Romania, there's something called a constitutional court. And they have the power to annul or cancel an election because the judges, the activist, globalist judges, obviously, in this constitutional court have annulled the results of the first round of the presidential elections.
And then something even more shocking happened. A stunning decision from Romania's Supreme Court. The November 24th election was officially annulled, and the runoff election scheduled for December canceled. And you won't believe why. Romania's highest court accused Russia, yes, Russia, of meddling in their elections. This after Romania's current sitting president, Klaus Iohannis, declassified a series of documents compiled by intelligence services that allege Georgescu's abrupt rise in popularity had not been, quote, a natural outcome, but rather was the result, I kid you not, it was the result of Russian actors artificially manipulating and exploiting TikTok's algorithm. It had to have been the result of something else, like nefarious forces, manipulating TikTok's algorithms. We don't know how you do it, but we know they did it.
But what is very interesting here is that the idea that somehow Russia has invested so much money in TikTok that it actually swing the election is bizarre. First of all, it's bizarre because most of the people, or a large proportion of the people that voted for Georgescu, live in the rural area, the countryside. They're essentially people who are farmers and peasants. They don't, on balance, hang out on TikTok. That's not the main media that they use. So that just is just not credible. But secondly, even if the Russians had used TikTok, at the end of the day, it was Romanian citizens rather than Russian spies who put the vote into the ballot box. So the whole thing is a fantasy that was created by the elite in order to delegitimize an election and ultimately to call the democratic process of decision-making into question.
How anyone has the power to do this, I don't know. But the reason they gave is completely ridiculous. They said that, well, he had a good social media campaign, basically because they said Russians were helping him on campaign on TikTok. Which, really, I mean, do you actually think that TikTok is going to swing an election? I mean, they're saying here that it was all the Russians. He had Russian help to campaign on TikTok, so they need to cancel and annul the elections. I'm laughing because it's just so ridiculous, but the situation is not funny because the elections have been stolen.
So it's one thing to say that people there's an influence operation going on, right? But which may or may not be true. But quite another thing to say that therefore it completely delegitimizes the election, because what you're effectively saying is that some speech is not allowed to be heard because of where it originates.
That's right. And it's very interesting that the other candidate, who's a social democratic candidate, who also surprised everybody by coming second, she wasn't targeted in the same kind of a way because of her politics being a little bit closer to that of the Brussels bubble. But I think what's really important here is this. I've never heard of any important election where there weren't outsiders trying to influence it. I mean, America influences elections everywhere in the world. So does Britain, so does France and Germany. That's a norm. You expect external actors to try to influence the outcome of an election. But that's part of the democratic process, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, sort of who is trying to influence the election. What matters is whether or not certain ideas resonate with the public or not. And I think what's very important, and this is something that even most Romanian observers recognize, what's really important here is that Ceausescu's ideas resonated with the Romanian public at this particular stage in time. And that's really the reality that they're trying to hide and obscure.
Their current president, the liberal globalist Ioannis, well, he, of course, was delighted with the court decision. After all, we don't want Vladimir Putin controlling our elections, do we? In the name of saving democracy, they are nullifying and canceling the people's right to vote. You literally cannot make this stuff up.
Yes, and you have to remember that these two governing parties have been around for a very long time. They were very much seen as being responsible for the dire state of the Romanian economy and the economic difficulties that people are facing in Romania. They're all also linked to a regime of corruption. People don't talk about corruption in Romania, but it's quite endemic. And there's a real dislike and resentment of the political establishment in Romania. So this vote, for the first time, represented an unambiguous crystallization of all that dislike and alienation that the voters had towards the main parties. And that is really why it was so important, because both Ceausescu and Lesconi, in their different ways, represented a different alternative to the establishment, and that was the key issue here.
Yeah, and as people have been hauled in front of and dragged to police stations in Romania, Ceausescu's supporters, etc., I was reminded of the Commission's similarly silent response as Donald Tusk in Poland enacted his own series of kind of minor coups in cultural life and in the judiciary, where again, because it's a so-called friendly figure for the EU, they're silent.
Yes, I think it tells us quite a lot about the perilous state of democracy within the European Union. I mean, we think of the European Union as the beacon of democracy, and historically, democratic culture and democratic public life was fairly advanced, particularly within Western Europe. But what we're now seeing is an incredible degree of democratic backsliding, pretty much tolerated and sometimes even incited by the European Commission to many, many parts of Europe. And that, to me, is a very dangerous precedent. It tells me that democracy is facing a very major challenge to its very existence within the European Union.
But when the people vote democratically and freely for someone that the deep state cabal doesn't want, then they overrule and overturn democracy. They try to do this if they can, and then put their own puppet in. You see, this is what happened in Ukraine in 2014. You had Yanukovych was the president. He decided that he didn't want to pursue membership of NATO and EU. And the next thing you know, there was a coup. And they put in a puppet, Poroshenko, and then you got Zelensky elected on a platform of peace, but then did a bait and switch and switched to war and just did what the cabal wanted him to do. And I think Carlin Georgescu would ask that question in Romania, as well as being proud of his country, wanting to lift his country into having a position, a culture, a feeling of positivity and self-esteem and I don't like the word pride, but you know what I mean. Gratitude for what they are. Let's put it that way. And to make their nation better and greater and be more positive about itself. And he would do that. And he would fight against all the degeneracy that's coming in with all this LGBTQTA, PI, whatever it is, all that stuff. Protect his children in his country from groomers that want to harm children. And there's a lot of that going on, and that needs to be dealt with as well. But I hope that the Romanian people will be able to fix this and overrule this odious ruling that's come from their so-called constitutional court and put in the president that they want.